What's up, and welcome to another episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. So today we're talking about the MSI Cyborg 15, the $1,000 RTX 4000 series laptop. Now the Cyborg 15 is MSI's replacement for the GF63 series in 2023. So that means this is their ultra low budget, cheapest machine they're going to be making for 2023. And I actually think the machine looks pretty dang cool for such a budget-oriented price point. The chassis features translucent plastic on the side and bottom and WASD and arrow keys. The overall chassis seems to be a remake of the old MSI Stealth 15, so super thin, super light, very portable, which I do like that. The thing only weighs 4.3 pounds, so I mean, if you want to take this with you to class or whatever, it's going to be an extremely portable machine, especially compared to many of the gaming laptops that have been coming out recently. One major downside to the Cyborg is that it only features a single fan. This thing would be so much easier for me to recommend if it had a dual fan system and featured higher TDP components. But the CPU and GPU are just going to be running at lower power levels and at reduced performance compared to laptops that have dual fan systems, more heat sinks, and better cooling solutions. Now the keyboard backlight is blue and it looks pretty good for a $1,000 machine. Overall, the style of the device is pretty on point for such a cheap device. But what specs do you actually get at the $1,000 price point? Let's take a look. So the $1,000 machine comes with an i7-12650H. This features 6 performance cores, 4 efficiency cores for a total of 16 threads. Now, I'm sure this is actually a pretty good performing CPU. Now, it's not going to be as good as some of the higher end CPUs you can buy in more expensive laptops, but for raw gaming, this is an excellent CPU just to get you in the door, get stuff done. And I mean, it has enough cores and threads to also do a good amount of video editing and productivity tasks, absolutely no problem. Though we don't know what the CPU TDP actually goes up to, I wouldn't expect it to be that high. The CPU in this machine is probably going to be throttled a bit lower. Again, we're dealing with a single fan for both the CPU and GPU performance. So the RTX 4050 or 4060 comes with a 45 watt TDP. Yes, that's right, 45 watts. It's very, very low, but as we saw in the NVIDIA presentation, they are claiming a much higher performance per watt for the Ada Lovelace architecture. So I don't want to completely discount this laptop entirely because of the 45 watt power limit. The new Ada Lovelace architecture is clearly much more efficient, especially when it comes to DLSS 3.0 applications with ray tracing enabled. For any games that have those two features, I would expect great performance with this laptop. But for the 90+% of games that aren't going to feature those performance enhancements, especially right now, maybe in a couple years, they'll have all of those upgrades on most of the games out there. But right now, most games don't feature DLSS 3.0 and ray tracing. So that means in the vast majority of games, it's really going to come down to the raw rendering performance capability of the RTX 4050 and 4060. And that's what has me a bit worried, because if you compare the specs between the RTX 4050 and 4060, you can see that the CUDA core counts for the RTX 4050 at 2560 actually matches up with the CUDA core counts for the RTX 3050 Ti. But the big advantage the 4050 has is that it can go up to a much higher clock speed, at least theoretically, if it can go up to 115 watts of power. I'm sure it could. But we already know the Cyborg 15 is a lower TDP part, so I'm thinking the performance of this RTX 4050 is going to be in the ballpark of the 3050 Ti. That's roughly maybe a little bit above, maybe a little bit below. But then in the DLSS 3.0 and ray tracing enabled games, I'm expecting the performance will be just a little bit better than an RTX 3060. But that's all speculation until we're actually allowed to benchmark and test these gaming laptops. The other thing that worries me a little bit about the RTX 4050 is that we only have a 96-bit memory interface bandwidth, and that's just not a lot, though we do have 6 gigs of VRAM, which is excellent. So you're not going to run out of texturing capabilities necessarily, but it's more just the throughput in AAA games, I think, is going to be the biggest limiting factor for this GPU. The 15.6-inch 144 Hz Full HD display has about 68% sRGB with about 260 nits brightness, but it's going to be a budget display. Now, MSI reps claimed a 9 millisecond response time, so hopefully there won't be much ghosting and it'll still be a fairly good gaming experience. Now, it can get up to 64 gigs of RAM, but MSI did not clarify how much RAM you're getting at the $1,000 price point. I'm guessing it's going to be 8 or 16 gigs. I'm hoping 16 gigs. It'll definitely make me lean more towards recommending it if it comes with the full 16 gigs. And I'm expecting a 256 gig or 512 gig SSD on this machine because, again, it's an ultra budget priced machine. Now, on the right, we have a USB Type A, a USB-C with DisplayPort, an HDMI 2.0, an Ethernet port, and a power adapter port. On the left, we have our headset port, USB 3.2 Type A, and a Kensington lock port with no ports on the back. Notice that our single fan design does come out on the rear left of the laptop. Another nice accent feature is the bottom venting has MSI True Gaming written in the bottom of the vents. Now, this thing comes with Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, 720p webcam, a 53.5 watt-hour battery, and a 120 watt power adapter. I'm guessing that's going to be a fairly small power adapter and portable. The Cyborg 15 for me is priced in such an interesting place. You know, when you compare it to other RTX 3050 Ti and 3060 laptops out there, especially the high TDP laptops like the Legion 5 and Acer Nitro 5, the Lenovo IdeaPad 3, these laptops feature higher TDPs and you can get them between $800 to $1,000 depending on how they're spec'd out. And for me, those laptops, especially since some of them come with much better displays, full HD 165 Hz with like 300, maybe 400 nits brightness. So when you factor in the display quality plus the higher TDP capability of these older machines, I'm pretty confident these RTX 3060 machines with better displays are just going to be a better buy than this $1,000 RTX 4050. So to me, this laptop will probably only be a good deal when it goes on sale for about $799. I wouldn't be surprised to see this thing go on sale periodically throughout the year, but especially when we get to Black Friday and Christmas sales, I would expect this machine to go down to at least $799, maybe even a little bit lower. And at that price point, I think I'll be more willing to recommend this thing. Now, I also want to mention MSI is going to release an RTX 4060 version of this machine for $1099, which may actually be a decent worthy upgrade, especially if that comes with any SSD or RAM upgrades. But even with the 4060, it's still going to be only a 45 watt part, so not going to be too much of a performance bump. All of that said, can you buy the Cyborg 15 if you love the style of it? Yes. And can you play some great games, get good FPS in esports games? Yeah, I'm sure this thing will still probably crank over 100 FPS in most esports titles. And I'm sure it can even play many AAA games at 60 plus FPS on like medium or low settings, and you're still going to get a great overall gaming experience with it. But me being the comparative analytical mind that I am, it's hard for me to recommend this at the $1,000 price point when compared to the competition. So those are my thoughts on the MSI Cyborg 15. I love gaming laptops, and if you want to hear my opinions in the future about gaming laptops, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. I'll see you in the next one. Brandon, out.